This is Henry Washington, and you're listening to the Average Joe Finances Podcast.
If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you smash the like and subscribe buttons. If you're listening to our podcast, go leave us a 5-star review. All of our links can be found in the video description or show notes below.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Average Joe Finances Podcast. I'm your host, Tanya, the Money Life Coach, and we're here today with Richard Wilson. He's the founder of Family Office Club, and he has so many cool insights. His background's awesome, and he's worked with amazing people. So welcome, Richard, to the podcast.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me here, Tanya.
Let's dive right in. You are at the forefront of some really cool AI stuff and all kinds of stuff on the investing side. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and share your story.
Yeah, sure. So I started our investor club in 2007. So it's been 18 years now. Hosted 300 in-person events for our investor club members and our investors. We've got about 1,000 active investors in the club, and we're doing 16 events per year right now. If anybody knows, Dr. Robert Cialdini is the most quoted psychologist alive in the business world. He says that it's scientifically proven that you get 16 times more people saying yes to you when you meet in person instead of just digitally. So we try to combine the two things. We've got about 17 million social media group members and our different networking groups online, many websites and a big YouTube channel, et cetera. But it's the meeting in person that big things get done through. So we're trying to combine big social media reach, artificial intelligence tools with meeting in person, try to create a little trifecta of getting stuff done.
That's so cool. I hadn't heard that stat, the 17 times. That makes sense. What is the reasoning behind that? Is because you meet more the person's personality, and is there any data around why that is?
Yeah, I think investing comes down to trust, just like partnering with somebody in business. And at the end of the day, body language communicates more than the words you say. And when you're investing, the context around what's being promised matters more than the words that are being stated. And if you're going to invest $5 or $10 or $15,000, even $25,000, you probably don't need to meet someone in person, or maybe you don't. If you're worried about that amount of money, you probably should meet in person still. But the point is, if you're going to invest or make a big decision of any type, but if you're going to invest $500,000 or $1 million, or if you're going to choose your spouse or buy a house or anything bigger than buying a car type decision, you're probably going to want to see that thing in person. And it's a long-term decision. And when you meet somebody just for 2 minutes, it often tells you more about them and whether you could find yourself trusting them than reading a 40-page pitch deck. And I think that's why people want to meet in person. It just tells you so much instantly about who they are, how they think, how they act, how much they have in common with you, et cetera.
That makes so much sense. I love that. What is your background? How did you get into finance and investing, and what drew you to this?
Yeah, sure. So my background, I started several businesses in grade school, one in middle school, a couple in high school, one in college. And so I learned a lot by doing that. I also learned that most of my ideas had no real demand behind them. People just didn't want what I was trying to sell them and starting the business. But I learned more by doing that than I did going to business school or getting my MBA. And so when I got into the world of raising capital, I found that I was wasting my time by going to people who are not wealthy enough to invest in the hedge fund that I was responsible for raising capital for. So I said to myself, this is not working, not effective. And I got on the call with one person. And they said, oh, I run a family office and all of my clients are ultra wealthy. And I said, oh, a family office, what does that mean? And as I tried to learn more, the only people helping me were random journalists from the Financial Times who had never worked a day in the industry. And so what I started is a free blog, started sharing what I was learning along the way. I started posting just once a week, and then once a day, and then 3 times a day. And we got on the front page of the Boston Globe when I was 26 years old, and the website took off to 3,000, 5,000 plus hits a day. Just all took off from there, filling a void on the ultra wealthy investor family office niche.
Yeah, that happened. It seems like you were a born entrepreneur. It's like you
Yeah.
you had that passion. And then so you did go to school. And then how did you transition into what you're doing now and the business you're continuing to build and all that?
Sure. Yeah. The blog started taking off unexpectedly, and people would call from a newspaper or radio station, and they would call the office where I was raising capital. And my boss had 25 years more experience than I did, but they would ask for me and they wanted a quote from me instead of from him. And he was like, "Why do they want your quote? You're like my intern, basically." And I was like, "Oh, it's because of this silly little blog." And he was regulated, and he was
Oh,
like, "You need to delete that thing. That looks like a compliance risk." And I was like, "It's taken off like crazy, so I don't think I want to delete it." And then by the time I got a job offer from someone else to go raise capital for them, and they were cool with the blog, the website was making more money than those people were offering to pay me. So I was like, well, I'm just going to run the blog and turn it into a business if I can. And then it all took off from there, just by listening to what people wanted, and then realizing that even if nobody else really paid me very much at all to learn a lot about family offices and how to work with the ultra wealthy, that knowledge would be worth so much one day that I don't care whether they would just pay me a little or moderate amount, because the knowledge itself would be so powerful. And so that led me to be very motivated to dig in, interview everybody I could, write a book for Wiley, buy familyoffices.com, build the social media groups around it to create a huge network. So I was just motivated on multiple levels to really make it work once I saw some traction there.
yeah, that's amazing. Sounds like an organic kind of progression. So where are you at in the business now, and what are you focused on with where you want to go and what you're working on?
Sure. Yeah. So we have closed a couple dozen investments into different assets, like a portfolio of medical practice domain names and a manufacturing company, et cetera. But 95% of our energy is really just on our investor club. I've been hosting those events, and we're doing two cool projects. So one is I bought billionaires.com. I'm interviewing 100 billionaires publicly. We've done 45 of those interviews so far.
Wow, that's
And yeah, it's exciting. We're trying to make that the number one website on billionaire mental models. And one thing we did to get there is I found there was 986 talks from billionaires publicly available. So I took those talks, transcribed them all, and put them into an AI tool. So you can have conversations with the collective wisdom of those a couple hundred billionaires. So that's pretty fun to play with. And that leads to our second area, which is AI tools. We've in-house developed our own AI tools. We've got 15 of them so far. And if you want, I can kind of explain the process we went through to get to developing our own tools. I think it might be super helpful for some of your listeners, maybe.
yeah, I know AI is such a big topic and people are trying to figure out what the best way is to use that with investing in finance. So yeah, give us that breakdown. I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, sure. So basically, like the rest of the world, I realized, oh, this AI thing is going exponential and I already feel behind. What are we doing? What should I be using? I was just using ChatGPT and that was it. And I was like, okay, what is this thing? And then I said, one way to get on top of it is I'm going to host my own AI Investor Club Mastermind event, even though I know really not that much about AI at all. And so we announced we would host that event 5 months from the time that we announced it. We said, we're going to do this. It's going to be in January 2025. I found the best speakers possible. We had 5 speakers at the masterminds who knew a lot about AI. We're using it every day. They were experts in agentic AI, which means building vertical AI agents for a specific industry, or they were just really on top of AI trends and daily usage. So that was step one. I was like, okay, I don't know anything. Here's a way to commit and make myself learn it by hosting an event on it within our investor club. And stage one of any CEO is just using normal LLMs, ChatGPT, Grok, et cetera, right? Stage two was to get ready for that mastermind. I was like, I got to find the best AI tools possible for Investor Club. Let me try, literally we tried 150 AI tools, and we found that 5 of them worked as we expected and were highly relevant to a business owner or an investor or someone raising capital. So it was a very low hit rate of ones that actually worked, weren't horrible, and were functional and were relevant. And so that really narrows down the list. And we spent so much time on that. If we didn't have that event coming up and I wasn't nervous about the event being horrible because maybe it would look like we didn't know what we were talking about at all, then I wouldn't have done all that work so quickly. But that's the second phase every business owner and really everyone should go through is look at all the tools, maybe not 150, but what are the top 30 tools that maybe you could use? Do they work? Which ones should you keep? Which ones should you not? And some we still use today. We like Fireflies for our sales team to transcribe every phone call they're on and look for little nuances of who talks too long or has too many filler words. And then we can take the transcripts from all of that to train an AI tool to chat with our clients, for example, right? So Firefly is super helpful. But the third stage is the most important one, and it is learning from the gaps in those other tools and the ideal case use studies for your team for AI and building your own AI tools, which is not as hard as it sounds, either through custom GPTs or notebook LLMs through Google. And then getting to that point where you've built out your own suite of AI tools. And that's where we are today. We've got 15 of these tools. We hope to be at 30 tools within the next 90 days. And we've just gotten amazing feedback from our investors, our club members. So we're super excited about that.
That's really interesting and really cool. And like how fast you're like, oh, I got to hop on this. And then you just figured it out. What are some of the top things that people are in need of AI? What are the top tools that they're using with what you're doing now?
It looks fast from the outside because 6 months ago we had 0 AI tools, but it was hundreds of hours.
Yeah.
Time. But there's 3 main types of AI tools we have today, and one more type. So there'll be a 4th type soon. The first type is looking at big data and just finding the most relevant data. So we have a investor pipeline builder tool where we have 22,000 investor profiles, and we're basically telling our members like, hey, you can't meet with 22,000 people, and if you email blast thousands of people, you're going to get a horrible reply rate. So maybe reach out one-to-one, develop relationships only with the 1% that matter out of 22,000. Like, which investors are in your backyard or right in the city where you're raising capital and buying assets, or what investors are looking for what you offer or would be most receptive. And so our AI tool looks at a pitch deck or your email pitch and says, oh, okay, you're in Seattle and you've got a med tech startup. Here are the 300 investors you should approach out of the 22,000 that are most likely to be receptive. And then you can do a very thoughtful job approaching those leads, et cetera. So that's the first type of tool. It's taking big data, making it more relevant, more accessible, more receptive to what you're trying to get done. And we do that with our investor databases. The next type is really looking at due diligence and just being smarter. Bezos says that with 1 million employees, he still has to be very decisive and quick. Elon says the ultimate weapon in business is speed. And so basically what we do with these tools is we look and we have an AI tool for forensic accounting, financial analysis, but more importantly, also a due diligence tool so that you can upload a pitch deck or a PPM and say, based on the 150 due diligence white papers I've trained you on, analyze in 10 seconds every word of this long pitch deck, this PPM, find things that are missing, red flags, is evaluation off, and what smart questions should I ask during due diligence? And it gives you this whole report on where they're based, their fees, and all the due diligence stuff that you should be considering, at least some new ideas. So that's super helpful. And anytime your team is doing something over and over again that takes a structured process or has a certain amount of repetitive analysis needed, you should just turn it into an AI tool. It's really as simple as that. The third level is really doing these collective intelligence tools like the billionaire tool I mentioned, and doing different tools like we'll take a pitch deck and based on 25 different criteria and rules, create a 1-line capital raising pitch out of a 30-page pitch deck and give you 7 options for that 1-line pitch. There's more tools than we have time to talk about. I wanted to give like a wide variety to show there's like data applications, there's collective intelligence tools, due diligence, honing your marketing materials. Probably at least one of those ideas is relevant to your listeners here.
Yeah, I'm sure more than one. Yeah, there's so much there. And like you said, now today we're just like overwhelmed with content, right? And overwhelmed with data. It's so much to go through. So like we're just bombarded, and then we're distracted. So figure out the best way to use AI tools and then leverage them in a way that's helps you in a quick way. And then some of that stuff, like you said, it would have taken you hours and hours, like in the past, or even some people are still doing it that way, forever to go through the data and kind of distill it and figure that out. Yeah.
I think the other thing that some people miss is that you can get advice from an LLM, but the advice is muddled because it's been fed by Wikipedia pages, random websites that crawled, and then 300 million users putting their thoughts into it. So yeah, if you want advice from the general public who is an average $10,000 in credit card debt and has a $4,000 net worth, you can talk to LLMs, right? But if you want advice from billionaires or if you want advice only from 1,000+ investors who've spoken on stage, or like, let's say you're a civil engineer, you're listening to this being like, how do I use this? So if you want your advice only to come from people you respect in the civil engineering space, you could build your own private coaching tool by having their thoughts or talks or whatever in there. You might have to get their permission if you're be selling that, et cetera. So be careful with that. But the whole point is you'd want your civil engineering strategies to come from the masters of the universe of civil engineering, not Wikipedia and random people who have random information on the internet. That's a really key point.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense when you put it in that way too, especially thinking about who you're taking the advice from. Like I always say, like when I'm coaching or even when I was getting into my financial journey and personal finance, like, why am I listening to broke people? You know, like, why am I taking advice from people who aren't where I want to be, or just letting other people's ideas like in there? So yeah, that's cool. And then tell us a little bit more about like Family Office Club, the Investor Club, and like what that looks like for people who want to join, or what that means.
Sure. So essentially, our investor club is made up of three things. We have our investor portal, which is like a Netflix-like mobile app. We have 1,200 videos in there. We can stream investor interviews, investor mandate summaries, fireside chats from on stage, live events you can stream live or watch HD recorded events. So the portal is one thing. The 15 AI tools is one thing. The third thing is really coming to the events in person. That's where you get the most done per minute of your energy spent. And then at our events, we host two different types of events. We have masterminds 12 times a year, and we host our events in Dallas, New York, South Florida, as well as Los Angeles. And so whatever part of the country you're in, we're probably in your region at least once every quarter. And on top of those dozen mastermind events that we host, which are just one day, 75-person events, we also host 4 investor summits per year. And these are bigger 450 to 750 person investor summits. At just one of those investor summits, you'll hear from 75 to 125 speakers on stage over just 2 or 3 days. So it's tons of insights. You get smarter on investment structures, strategies, how to scale, due diligence, how to talk to investors, how not to, mistakes, opinions in general about where interest rates or inflation is going. It just helps you get more high conviction. And the thing that is most surprising is that we hear over and over again that just being around so many optimistic, like decamillionaire, 10 million plus net worth people talking about where they're putting their energy and their money is just super highly motivating to be around versus maybe some of the general rhetoric they hear in society of this is bad or that's bad. And it's just all about what's bad and not working in the news, or something's on fire or someone got killed or something. So kind of like the opposite of that.
Yeah, amen to that. So true. Surrounding yourself with that positivity and the people who are like at that next level and where you want to be, for sure. Let's jump into the final round. What's the biggest mistake that you've ever made when it's come to your finances or business life?
I think biggest mistake I've ever made was investing in someone who turned out to be a complete fraud. Luckily, the investment amount was very small. So it wasn't the biggest mistake in terms of a dollar amount. It was biggest mistake in terms of like, how did I not know he was a fraud? And what's interesting about it is that we had a $50,000 due diligence report on him from a third party that had gone out and commissioned this report. And despite that, meeting in person, et cetera, it all went wrong. And so I think the big insight there for me and why it was like the biggest mistake is just because the reputational damage, if I had, let's say, 5 or 10 of my clients follow me into that deal, which happens sometimes, and if they had put millions of dollars with that person and they turn out to be a fraud, then it could end very poorly for me. So I think the big lesson is just that, like, you have to know in this industry that you can do all your due diligence and everything thoroughly, and things could either just not go well, or the person could just be a really smart fraud. And that's what happened in this case. And so I think it's just a lesson that investors learn over time as they get battered by some deals going well and some doing poorly. It's just that there's always risk, and you have to be logical, non-emotional, and eyes wide open that you may never see that money again, no matter what that person told you or how secure the deal might feel or look. So I think that's like something that's good for people to know and hear, because they might feel really dumb if they invest in something and lose their money. But it happens all the time, and you want to try to avoid that, obviously. But just being like emotionally, logically like knowing that, hey, that is what happens many times. So just know that going in and not be surprised by it.
Yeah, that's a great reminder. That's like you said, people are convincing, and that's why that show, American Greed or whatever, is so popular. It happens every day to the smartest of people. And yes, it's like the same quote. It reminds me of, don't give anybody money expecting to get it back. You know what I mean? It's like, even if you're letting somebody in your family borrow money, like never expect to see that money again. You know what I mean? It's like what you have, the emotional side of it, like what you're saying.
I know Mr. Wonderful says that he has a rule when family members ask him for money, and he says it happens a lot. He'll see if he can do it. And if he does do it, he says, I'm going to lend you this money. I don't expect you to ever pay me back, but I don't want you to ever ask me for money again. And here's the amount I can lend you. And it's basically a gift. So here you go. And it seems like a little bit overly harsh from my perspective. A lot of family offices treat it very differently than that. But his main point is, I'm not ever going to see that money again. I just don't want them constantly coming to me for more and more money. That's kind of related to what you're saying.
Yeah. I've heard him say that before. That's so good. What's something that you learned that you wish you would have known when you first started out as an entrepreneur or in this business? I guess you started out so young, an entrepreneur. But
yeah, I learned a lot. I think that who you associate with informs other people of who you are. So I think that the faster that you associate with the highest caliber speakers on stage at an event, or co-authors in the book, or blue chip partners, the faster the wheel all goes. And I think it's very much related to the other insight that, like, the more integrated your life is, the faster everything goes. If you're trying to do one thing, and then where you live, or who you married, or where you spend your time, or who's on your team is not in line and integrated with that, then everything's just painful, because it's like you're dragging a bunch of anchors. But if you align things, then the world gets out of your way and everything goes much faster, because all of your energy is aligned. There's not people holding you back, making every part of it hard. So I think a lot of us have just 2% of the things we interact with causing 80% of our stress. We just need to delete those things from our life. And I'm sure you've seen that a lot.
Oh yeah, that's huge. Yeah, your environment. And I was on a podcast the other day. It was like, in the topic of marriage, and you keep seeing that. I've been seeing that quote a lot more lately. That's the number one financial decision you can make, is your partner. If they're not on board, or if you're not on the same page financially, it makes everything way harder.
Oh yeah, for sure. Who you spend your time with is a more important decision than what you spend your time on, is how I've heard one person say it.
Yeah. What are some tips or tricks you have that you recommend to somebody who's just getting started today, maybe on the investing side or just with what you do? Obviously, you deal with high net worth, but some ideas around that.
Sure. I think whether you're raising capital or investing money, and if you're just getting started, is to, at the beginning, focus, right? If you're investing and you've never looked at a healthcare deal before, it's going to be hard to navigate that. So maybe start with the industry where you made your money. If you're a lawyer, maybe you could invest in litigation funds where you're funding court cases, et cetera, because you're a lawyer. So you could read into it, see who's credible. And once you look at 30 of those, you can pick the number 1 or 2 that you like best. But if you did want to go into healthcare or dry cleaners or stem cells, whatever the niche is, you could start with nothing, go to 5 conferences a year, read books on it, read magazine articles, podcasts, and look at 30 deals. And you could probably then, after looking at 30 deals, invest in 1 or 2 that are halfway decent. The problem is most investors start by investing in a whole bunch of startups that lose their money in a whole bunch of different industries, and they don't move up any of the learning curves because they're looking at random deals in random industries over random periods of time, versus saying, we're going to figure out how to invest in self-storage. We're going to invest in healthcare only, and within that niche, medical practices that are already profitable. So stay away from random investments and random startups. It's a great way to lose all your money quickly. And then the other side, if you're raising capital, would be, again, to make sure that what you're doing doesn't just sound exciting to you in your own head, but when you talk to an investor who sees thousands of deals, make sure that your deal is very unique in a way they actually care about to that investor who's really in the flow of deals, and don't offer what everyone else is offering. Most people raising capital have 1,000 other people offering the exact same thing. Like Peter Thiel says, you don't want to compete. You want to offer something completely different than what everyone else in the market is offering. And then you're going to gain traction way faster.
Yeah. Being able to stand out. I love those 2 points on, like, the niching down in something specifically in the beginning, and then also just figuring out ways to stand out and be different.
Right.
For success, for sure. What are some of your favorite business, investing, real estate, some of those books and podcasts you like to read personally?
Yeah, sure. I'm really big on books. And so I've got some favorites. There's a book called What It Takes by Steve Schwarzman. He's the founder of Blackstone. It's awesome. There's a book from Sam Zell called Am I Being Too Subtle? I definitely recommend people checking out that book. And what's interesting is I've had a room of, let's say, 750, maybe close to 800 people before. And I asked them, how many of you have read, I don't know, 50 or 100 business books? And like lots of hands went up. I said, how many of you read 10 books authored by a billionaire? And nobody's hand went up. So the thing is, most of us are reading books from people who are really good at marketing their books, not people who are really good at business, at least compared to billionaires. So I really recommend you just stop reading books from the bestseller list and instead read books from people who are in your exact niche where you want to go, and people who are billionaires, perhaps, or the titans of whatever industry you're in. Things like Eli Broad has a book called Unstoppable. And most people have not read that book or ever heard of him, but at billionaires.com/books, I've got a free list of my top 10 billionaire books I think everybody should read. And there's about 240 books authored by billionaires. So you could spend the next 5 years just reading billionaire books and not run dry of those before you go back to those other ones. Yeah.
Love that. That's so cool. I love that you have that list, and that's something good to think about too. Who is the book coming from? Who is this person? And do I want to learn from them or not?
Yeah.
Where can people find more information about you? Website, social media? You said YouTube.
Sure. Yeah. The best place is on LinkedIn. We have a free newsletter called the Investor Club Edge. We put out 1 or 2 articles every week to put some of our best insights there. The other place is familyoffices.com, plural, familyoffices.com. We've got our event dates up there. We have membership details up there. We also have our AI tool details up there. We just did a webinar walking through like a visual demonstration of all 10 of our AI tools. If you like that part of this podcast recording, then check out our Centimillionaire Strategies YouTube channel, and you'll see the webinar replay link there near the top. And we pretty openly just share like exactly what we built and exactly how it functions, so you can get some ideas for stuff you might want to build for yourself.
That's cool. Yeah, lots of resources there. Awesome. Thanks for joining us today. We really appreciated having you on. And do you have any like final thoughts or words of wisdom, anything we missed that you want to say to our listeners?
Yeah, I would say that from interviewing 45 billionaires, one thing that's super clear to me now is that they reject things that everyone agrees with. If all of your activities are confirmed as the right way to do it and a best practice, you will fail because you're going to be emulating the average and the herd mentality. Over and over again, the billionaires emphasize that people laughed in their face, told them they didn't know what they were doing, told them it was impossible, or the industry doesn't work that way. And they've learned to lean forward on those ideals, those ideas, when they feel like there's a reason why it might be extremely effective. So we're going to make it work, even if that's not how the industry works. That's how it's going to work for us going forward. And just rejecting that herd mentality and really doing a few things, maybe not everything in your business, of course, but a few things that are wildly different than everyone else. Otherwise, you're never going to have wildly different results than everyone else.
Yeah, there's like that risk associated with that, but I think that's a reframe on something, and just having that vision. You dropped some of those names earlier, like having that vision and being able to like, no, thinking outside the box and like, I see this, and not just 10 feet ahead, but like 100,000. So I love that. Thanks for joining us, Richard. We appreciated having you on. It was great to talk with you about everything you're doing. And thank you to our listeners at the Average Joe Finances podcast. Make sure that you go and leave us a 5-star review today. Let us know what you liked about today's podcast and share this with somebody who needs it too. And we'll see you guys soon. Bye.
Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you for making it to the end of this episode. Greatly appreciate you being here with me today on the Average Joe Finances podcast. If you haven't done so yet, make this the episode that you go leave us a 5-star rating or subscribe to our YouTube channel. The Average Joe Finances podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Have an outstanding day.